Go.
Thanks, Chris. All right, let's get started. Awesome to see everyone here. 8-Bit Oni, seeing a bye, Space Tacos, everyone jumping in. And thank you so much, Chris, and the Study GRC team for giving me another opportunity to talk. This one's going to be a little more experimental than than I expected. So thank you all for joining my talk today. This is going to be data governance, a primer and pathway for GRC professionals. So if you're not familiar with me in the group, my name's Chris Hidalgo. I have 5 years in the GRC and security space. I have my Security Plus and CISA, and I'm currently working as a security analyst. I just started a new position, so everything is fresh and new and drinking out of the fire hose, all of that. But before my security journey, I actually had a previous life in library and information science. So as I found out more about data governance, I'm like, this is kind of the marriage of library and information science meets security. So I wanted to share what I did in my deep dive and developed together a primer to share with you all. So why this talk? Let's get technical. GRC professionals continue to have more and more demanding just kind of knowledge, skill sets, particularly in the privacy and data management. Thanks, AI. We often hear more about the IT management side. So as you're going through certifications, coming from like an IT background, everything is more like systems, networks. You might do some like application security. And then the data side really kind of gets pushed away on the side, at least from my impression from the certs that I've taken. It's really, okay, that's the database administration side, and we don't go there. That's a dark and scary place full of data analytics and data management. Let's not go into there. Really, we talk about data assets and knowing that the flows between all of our systems and applications are becoming increasingly prevalent in what we do in GRC. I do excuse the cat howling. He should be a little bit quieter later. A continuation of that. So back to that talk and kind of rant about certification materials. There's really a gap as far as like in our security industry on data management and data governance. So I wanted to fix that. An example, took my CISA, and I've been looking into study materials with CISSP. So shout out to B-Dubs for coordinating that course. They cover data management at kind of that ownership level and then just like move on. If you're familiar with some of the Mike Chappell books, he'll often refer to DAMA as like the definitive source for anything data management related. They have what's called their data management body of knowledge, the DM BOK, and it is massive, like a 600-page book. So we're not going to cover all of it today, but a lot of the talk that I'm covering is going to hit those main elements as we go along today. So our agenda, I'm going to talk first about what is data governance. We're going to cover GRC and data governance and really look at some of the future outlook. We'll be covering kind of upcoming regulations, emerging technologies like AI, even existing technologies that are just becoming more prevalent, have existing vulnerabilities, and are a kind of like a current topic as far as how we manage our data. We'll talk about skilling up as always, and plenty of resources to share. I plan on curating a full list of the resources I used for this talk and dropping them in the Discord. It got a little unwieldy to just kind of cram into this presentation. And then we'll talk about next steps on kind of a cost-effective path forward to demonstrate your knowledge and further your skill set in data governance. So first, what is data governance? I plucked this directly out of the DAMA DM BOK, but data governance is really that authority and control over the management of data. So similar to what we would see on the security side, like the overall planning, implementation, monitoring, and enforcement of security within our program. But this is geared towards data assets primarily. So I made this analogy because my wife loves The Parent Trap. GRC and data governance, are they secret siblings? Did GRC get raised by their American dad and data governance get raised by their British mom? You're going to see a lot more similarities as we go through today, that they're closer to siblings or kind of cousins rather than being far apart. So in GRC, we're writing policies, we're creating security awareness messaging, we're doing audit reports, gap analysis, risk assessments, the whole 9 yards. Surprise, data governance basically does the same thing. We're writing policies, creating standards. We may be doing more data literacy, and it has some security awareness components, but Really, all those core areas and the assessment of those areas, they're in data governance roles too. Some examples that I've seen. So I was curating as I was looking through in a previous job search on kind of like, okay, what kind of skills do we look at in data governance? You're going to see developing those policies really with data integrity and quality in mind. You're going to see access control policies regarding data, data classification, data minimization. Data minimization is a little bit of making sure that we collect only the data we need so that we are really honing in our kind of our threat exposure, making sure that we don't over collect and that exposing more risk if it were to be breached. Data retention is also kind of hand in hand, making sure that we're holding on to that data as long as necessary and properly disposing of it afterwards. You're going to be collaborating with stakeholders across departments. You're going to be writing standards and making sure that you're enforcing adherence to those policies. And then as I was going along, there are some common data governance tools that I was seeing in the industry. So Informatica is a like metadata management tool. It has it's pretty powerful. It has other features as well. So I wanted to mark that down as kind of something like if you chose the tool to learn, probably Informatica. Going down, if you are a Microsoft shop or interested in like more of the Azure side, Microsoft Purview and Microsoft Fabric are becoming even more popular. So I'm even seeing these getting incorporated into the AZ900 or in their own certifications. And then Snowflake is also a very common one as far as data management goes. So I wanted to show kind of the context of the picture of where data governance fits within the business. This is summarized from a Maven Analytics slide covering the same content. So really establishing that overall strategy of how your business is using data and just kind of the goals oriented with it, depending on what industry you're in. The data architecture, so really the design of the structure and flow within systems. Maven has a great analogy for this. Really, it's like the plumbing and piping of where data goes. And then to follow along with their analogy, data governance is almost like the building codes of how to use that data and what standards do we want to have in place for the use of data. So working through that DAMA book, they have what they call the DAMA Wheel. And it's funny because we covered three pillars there, but data governance almost has like a whole wheel of sub areas about it. We're definitely not going to cover all of these today, but I did want to show it here. You're going to see a lot of familiar things. You're going to see data security in there. You're going to see data storage and operations. So there's going to be that business continuity kind of recovery base within data management as well. But really, the main areas I wanted to cover today are going to be these. So, metadata, that's a pretty specific definition that we'll be walking through today. And I'll try not to get too into ISO. I think I have like maybe 2 instances of ISO in this talk, but they have a standard for metadata. Reference and master data, data modeling and design, data quality. Those are going to be the main areas we cover. Talking about kind of the roles and responsibilities in data governance, I want y'all to focus on two definitions. Everyone's got like a whole slew of definitions. Let's stick to these two. So you have your data owner. It's going to be that high level individual. So think like C suite, executive level, or they could be kind of whoever's designated as that role. They oversee all of the data types within their given job area. So think like your CFO is in charge of all the financial data ultimately of the company or the organization. Data stewards, this is where it gets really messy. Um, just know that they manage data on behalf of others. So, and they may have other duties as well with handling that data just to reduce data risk and extract as much value as possible. So really, they're kind of the molders and shapers of the data that's being data governance controls. So as I was going along and trying to draw those connections between data governance and what we do in GRC, I was thinking on like, do I refer to NIST CSF? Do I refer to ISO 27001? Do I get banned from doing talks again by covering ISO again? I decided to choose a like unified framework, almost like a whole catalog. Think like a NIST 853 level of controls. It's an absurd amount with the secure controls framework. It's open source and maps across really any kind of framework you can think of. And I went through and filtered. So I filtered out 196 controls that are data governance related, data classification, retention, or like data protection impact analysis assessment related, that's about 15% of this whole catalog that are data governance related as a suggested control or a program in place to mitigate a lot of those risks. You'll see similar NIST CSF functions for it too. So on the governance side, we are really like before boom. So we're at that detect, identify, protect. We may have some respond and recover duties as well, but what you'll probably see in data governance is more of like the business continuity, making sure that we have correct backups in place or traceability to like the source of record system. And as I was filtering this out and kind of manipulating it, I wasn't even including the AI controls they've implemented. So could be way more than what I've listed here. So plugging along with those sections of the DAMA wheel, we have metadata. So think of it as data about data. We've probably seen it with like EXIF data, like you create a picture, it has, the dimensions of the picture, the format of the picture, the camera it was taken from. You have data associated to another piece of data. So it really explains general characteristics of it, content, format, purpose. And it is a key step for data management. So really knowing, okay, if it has metadata from its origin system, it's good to know that as it makes its way throughout the organization or is aggregated within kind of a source of record system. So knowing where it originated from, it might have other details of like when it was last backed up, how current it is. So metadata is really kind of that trace route function um, property that you want to know and manage within your data. And then really think about compatibility. So knowing the metadata of something and knowing how it matches across the organization shows like how compatible it is from system to system. Reference and master data. So this is really all about standardization. So reference data, it's going to be a standardized set of values. This definition uses country names and product names. So it's like, okay, every instance of Texas is spelled TX in the database, making sure that that's consistent and there's not misspellings or kind of like concrete facts that are not varied between. So you'll see like country names, product categories, things like that. A lot of standardization with how those are categorized. Master data, it's going to be those core data sets. So anything customer oriented, employee oriented. Think of this as kind of your ERP. So making sure that all the employees are consistent throughout the organization, especially when it comes to payroll processes. And then like customer relationship management. So if you're on the sales side, knowing that, okay, this customer has purchased these products, we've had this existing relationship, these existing contracts tied to it. So kind of if you were to tag systems to these concepts, think of the ones that you probably use often in a business. Data modeling and design. So data modeling, without getting into the weeds of it, think of kind of like your database diagram. So like your ERD diagrams. It starts with entities. So really they're the nouns of yeah, the data and data. I'm more of on the data side. I may not be correct, but good point, Techie. So really those entity levels, think of them as kind of those tables within a database. It's like, okay, this employee table or this person table. Relationships are just going to be those interactions between entities. You'll have your attributes. So those are almost like the columns and fields that describe that entity. So me as a person, I have an age, I have a address, I have kind of like a gender marker or anything like that. All those attributes that contribute to me. And then you have your domains. So really any of the possible values. So it could be like an age and date range. It could be a binary value depending on whatever data is in it. And then any other options. Design. So you'll see this often like in a graphic format or in a tabular format. You're going to see your entity relationship diagrams. You're going to see unified modeling language. So that's particularly if there's kind of like a full system flow that you're wanting to document. So that one kind of is a step above just the ERD. And then you'll have your data flow diagrams. So knowing where a piece of data goes across the system, you'll probably see that as like a regulatory requirement or a control requirement. And then data dictionaries is really kind of like a table list of all the possible values you can have within a given database. I did show some examples here. So kind of to iterate on this, and don't judge me on here, this was one of the graduate projects I had when I was in library school and just kind of mapping out how like a general billing system worked. So you'll have like your patron, they have a last name, first name, email. You may have a book with its own attributes. Really, you'll see kind of like these tables have relationships and then they have specific actions on how they interact. And then they may have specific fields that have their own restrictions or constraints on what can be entered into them or what kind of data they accept. So that is where you see that data dictionary over on the right side, just to kind of illustrate those concepts. Data quality. So if you are coming from like an audit side in GRC, we're also conducting audits here. So it might be like a data maturity assessment, making sure that it is reliable and accurate, making sure that it's up to date. You may perform what's known as like a quality assessment. So all of those areas we were covering just kind of in a more formal structure and kind of basically rating the quality of a given data set. Some of the future outlook that I wanted to illustrate here towards the end of the talk was AI is going to fundamentally change how we manage data within the organization and just continue to pile on kind of the additional responsibilities we have, whether you stay in GRC or branch out into data governance. So, fully integrated in the data management lifecycle, I plucked this screenshot from the data management essential training, really illustrating that like AI's governing the management cycle as well as our data governance and compliance on either side. And that makes data quality even more important because as it's pulling from multiple sources, we don't want that garbage in, garbage out, skewing our models or shifting how our data is interpreted. And then also the vulnerabilities involved with AI models as we start welcoming it more into the enterprise setting or building new models off of enterprise information. So that drift, hallucinations, um, all that ingestion into a model or influenced by a model is going to be a data governance problem to solve. APIs, as I talked about earlier, just it's an existing technology, but as it becomes more and more widespread and adopted, knowing the inherent issues with it, where it has that direct access to data and circumvents a lot of those kind of like traditional controls we would see just because you can tap into an overly exposed data set. API University also goes into this in a lot of depth, literally showing just kind of how you can leap across all the controls in place and just hop into data if it's mismanaged. And they also cover that OWASP API Security Top 10. So you'll be able to kind of see the access controls with data management, really securing that API endpoint and that database that's tapping into. Regulations are going to continue to be more that future outlook for data governance. So, of course, the EU has their GDPR, we have our CCPA, and additional privacy laws are being passed statewide. Recently, we did have that Department of Justice ruling, so personal data, government data. Um, my wife was super helpful in pulling extra articles as we were going along, and I was like, okay, I need to do a clean cutoff of how many resources we refer to. But also, over 20 states do have data governance program requirements, including like where I'm from, Texas, they have a whole section of the Texas DIR, the Department of Information Resources, data dedicated to data governance. NIST is also jumping into the game or kind of refining how they have their existing profiles, coming a little bit more from the privacy side, but they are currently working on a data governance and management profile. It's still in those early draft and kind of call for comments and revisions. But I imagine by the end of 2025, going into 2026, this will be closer to final. And then coming more from the EU, UK side, you're going to see that Data Governance Act also being in place for anyone in the handling of EU citizen information. So we're seeing these being enforced actively and continue to be, more relevant in our industry. So scaling up in data governance, I really wanted to kind of dial it back because I know this is a lot. As soon as I started mentioning data analysis, it's like this is something I haven't touched on a whole lot as I've been working in security. Having those base foundations though will get you a long way there, and you can have a good starting point in your journey. So knowing kind of how basic information system management works, like from a change management side to a secure development lifecycle, some of the data modeling examples I showed earlier knowing how an ERD is created or being able to understand an ERD and know how like the underlying schema of a database works. And then SQL, I see that all the time in job postings. I did want to recommend PostgreSQL because that's a great starting point. It has all the basic components of the syntax, and then there's a lot of books that specifically go on to you know teach you the basics of it. There's other data governance training too. DAMA has that DMBOK that I showed earlier and tried to lift up onto camera. Other independent Udemy instructors have created their own courses based on that DAMA content too. Dataversity.net, it was one of the recent resources I found while searching. They have free articles too. I haven't quite delved fully into them, but it's a great place to kind of look at definitions or topics within the industry. And then the Texas DIR and other state resources, a lot of those are free, and a lot because they have those requirements for state institutions. Go ahead and look in those as a citizen and utilize the free resources available. So a little bit of a highlight here for those tools. PostgreSQL, it's open source. It's used as a backend for many applications, and you may be familiar with it working in your current roles. I actually found out that it's the backend at CrowdStrike, so I was like, oh, another checkbox for PostgreSQL being in the wild. But then it has that close syntax to ISO 9075, which is that SQL standard. And that's the last SQL reference I'll have, Chris. My apologies. We'll also, if you want some hands-on exercises, pgexercises.com has basically like a web-based GUI with a series of exercises from select statements all the way to more advanced queries. Free Code Camp had a surprising amount of content on this. Some of it was a little retired, but it's all PostgreSQL based. So you can like hop into Gitpod and run queries, build your own databases, and have examples to put on your GitHub to demonstrate your knowledge to employers. Maven Analytics also has SQL courses. They're a little bit more expensive, but then if you wanted to jump into Excel or Power BI, they also have courses for that. And then on the just kind of the lab side, you can quickly drum up a database in Docker and use PGA admin as that like GUI management interface. So you can do imports into it, you can run queries out of it. It's pretty easy to stand up, and it doesn't take a lot of resources to do. You could probably set it up on a laptop pretty easily. SQL Fiddle is something that I used in grad school quite a bit. You can literally take the text output of how a database is structured, throw it in there, and then just immediately start running queries and commands. So some next steps, as I was going through this, I was like, okay, so where does someone go next? And I think the most cost-effective path is gearing more towards the LinkedIn Learning, because either you subscribe to it as a premium subscriber or maybe your work offers it. I'm building out a playlist as I go along, but some of the notable ones I noticed was the CompTIA Data Systems. I had no idea this certification existed, but Mike Chappell has a course, and like we've said before on the channel about Network Plus, it's more about the knowledge than it is to test out on that. I honestly haven't seen this certification on job requirements or anything like that. So, but it gives you a great foundation of like, if I am brand new to data management, and this explains kind of like all those core concepts. Data management essential training, I referred to that earlier. They talk about AI and data governance, and then the rest of these are all data governance related. That for Dummies book, the author also has a complimentary course on LinkedIn Learning, and then a good friend of mine, Megan Monteval, has really dived into the AI governance part. So if you're wanting to jump into like the bleeding edge of where this is going, I recommend those courses as well. So to recap what we covered today, covered what is data governance. We kind of showed how it is maybe that secret sibling to GRC. We also covered those, just kind of that direct comparison between the two. Some of the future outlook from both kind of the regulatory side and the emerging technology side. Some resources. I definitely am resource heavy in my talks, but I try to curate as many free or cost-effective ones available. And then covering those next steps on kind of where do I go from here? How do I demonstrate knowledge or show that I'm actively learning data governance? I appreciate all of y'all's time today, and it's been awesome to jump in on these. Life's been a little busy lately, so it's been great to talk to y'all, share what I've been learning along the way, and maybe make this topic a little bit easier to understand or at least give you a path forward. So if you would like to connect with me, I'm still very GRC focused. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and here on the on our Discord. I'm active on Study GRC and the Simply Cyber Discords.